Marcus Hill had learned, over the years, the exact moment when patience turned into something heavier. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was the quiet tightening in his chest, the awareness that he was being weighed, measured, and silently dismissed before he had even finished speaking. The hotel lobby was immaculate. Polished marble floors reflected the warm glow of chandeliers. Soft instrumental music drifted through the air, carefully chosen to suggest luxury without demanding attention. Everything about the place whispered money, status, and exclusivity. Everything except the way Marcus was being treated. He stood at the front desk, one hand resting on the handle of his travel bag, the other holding a room key that no longer worked. He had been standing there for nearly 10 minutes. "Excuse me," Marcus said calmly, his voice even. "My room hasn't been serviced since yesterday morning. I asked twice already." The receptionist, a young white woman with perfectly styled hair and a tight professional smile, did not look up immediately. Her fingers continued tapping at the keyboard, slow and deliberate, as if Marcus were background noise rather than a paying guest. "One moment, sir," she said, still staring at the screen. Marcus exhaled quietly and glanced around the lobby. A white couple in business attire had just approached the adjacent desk. Another receptionist immediately greeted them with enthusiasm, leaning forward, smiling broadly, calling them Mr. and Mrs. before they had even given their names. Marcus noticed the contrast. He always did. When the receptionist finally looked at him, her eyes flicked briefly to his face, then down to his jacket. Casual, neat, but not expensive looking, and then back to the screen. "Housekeeping works on a schedule," she said. "If they didn't come, they'll get to it tomorrow." "I checked in 3 days ago," Marcus replied. "Yesterday, no one came. Today, no one came. My trash is full, there are no clean towels, and I have meetings in an hour." She gave a polite shrug. "We're very busy." Marcus felt that familiar tightening again. "I understand that," he said, "but I paid for daily service." "That's what the booking says," she sighed, the kind of sigh that made it clear she believed this conversation was unnecessary. "Sir, if you want to file a complaint, you can email management." "I'd prefer to speak to a supervisor," Marcus said. Her smile thinned. "They're unavailable." At that moment, a tall white man in a tailored suit stepped up behind Marcus, clearing his throat loudly. The receptionist immediately straightened. "Good afternoon, sir," she said brightly, her tone transforming. "How can I help you today?" Marcus turned slightly, surprised. The man hadn't even been acknowledged as waiting. He had simply been prioritized. "I was here first," Marcus said, not raising his voice, not stepping aside. The receptionist's expression hardened just enough to be noticeable. "Sir, I'll be with you in a moment." She then turned back to the man in the suit. "What can I do for you?" Marcus stepped back half a pace, stunned, not because it was shocking, but because it was so painfully familiar. The message was clear. His time mattered less. As the receptionist processed the other guest's request, an extra pillow, handled with urgency and repeated apologies, Marcus's thoughts drifted. He thought of the long flight, the reason he was here, the importance of the meetings he had scheduled. He thought of how carefully he had chosen this hotel because of its reputation for professionalism. When the man in the suit walked away satisfied, Marcus leaned forward again. "Now," he said quietly, "can I speak to a supervisor?" The receptionist met his eyes for the first time, really looked at him, and something unreadable passed over her face. "I told you, they're unavailable." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then please note this as a formal complaint." She typed something quickly, barely glancing at him. "Done." "How will I know it's been recorded?" Marcus asked. Her fingers paused. "Sir, are you implying I wouldn't do my job?" "I'm asking for confirmation," Marcus said. "That's all." Her jaw tightened. "Security," she said suddenly, pressing a button beneath the desk. Marcus blinked. "For what?" "You're causing a disturbance." The word landed heavily between them. 2 security guards appeared from the side corridor, both white, both tall, both already wearing expressions that suggested they had made up their minds before hearing a word. "Is there a problem?" one of them asked, though his eyes were already fixed on Marcus. "I've been asking for housekeeping service," Marcus said steadily, "and to speak to a supervisor." The receptionist folded her arms. "He's being aggressive." Marcus almost laughed, but he didn't. He knew better. One of the guards stepped closer. "Sir, we're going to need you to calm down." "I am calm," Marcus replied. "I haven't raised my voice once." The guard's gaze flicked to Marcus's bag. "Let's take this somewhere else." "No," Marcus said firmly. "I'm a guest here. I want this resolved professionally." A few heads had turned now. Whispers moved through the lobby. Marcus could feel eyes on him, not curious, not concerned, but wary, as if they were waiting for him to confirm a stereotype. He reached into his jacket slowly, deliberately, and pulled out his phone. "What are you doing?" the guard asked sharply. "Documenting this," Marcus said. "For my records." The receptionist scoffed. "Unbelievable!" Marcus met her gaze. "What's unbelievable," he said quietly, "is that asking for clean towels turned into this." The guards hesitated. The receptionist looked uncomfortable now, glancing toward the office doors behind the desk. That was when the elevator chimed. A man stepped out, mid-50s, silver hair, expensive watch, posture of someone accustomed to authority. He took in the scene in seconds. The guards, the gathered guests, Marcus standing calmly with his phone in hand. "What's going on here?" he asked. The receptionist turned pale. That, Marcus thought, watching the manager approach, is when everything began to change. The next morning arrived without apology. Rain pressed against the tall hotel windows, turning the city outside into a grey blur. In the lobby, the air smelled faintly of polished wood and burnt coffee. Business travellers hurried past the front desk, rolling suitcases, murmuring into phones. No one looked twice at Daniel as he stood near the concierge stand, wearing the same dark hoodie and jeans from the night before. He hadn't slept. The memory of the manager's dismissive smile replayed in his head on a loop, the way the man had leaned back slightly, arms crossed, already done listening before Daniel finished speaking. "We'll look into it," he'd said, the universal phrase that meant nothing will happen. Daniel approached the front desk again. A different employee was on duty now, a young woman with tired eyes and perfectly practiced politeness. "Good morning," she said automatically. "I need to follow up on a complaint from last night," Daniel replied, keeping his voice calm. "Room 1417. Her fingers paused above the keyboard. "What kind of complaint?" "About noise, and about how it was handled." She nodded without meeting his eyes. "I don't see any notes here." "That doesn't surprise me." She looked up then, briefly. There was a flicker of something. Curiosity, maybe sympathy, but it vanished just as quickly. "I can leave a message for the manager." "I already spoke to him." "Mr. Collins?" "Yes." Her lips pressed together. "He's not in yet." Daniel exhaled slowly. "Then I'll wait." He moved to one of the leather chairs near the wall. From there he could see everything. The elevators opening and closing, the doorman greeting guests, the staff laughing quietly among themselves. Time passed in small humiliations, being asked if he was waiting for someone, being offered directions as if he were lost, being ignored when he raised his hand. Finally, just before noon, the energy in the lobby shifted. Conversations lowered, spines straightened. A tall man in a tailored grey suit entered through the revolving doors, shaking rain from his umbrella. "Mr. Collins." Daniel stood. The manager smiled broadly at the desk staff, exchanged a few words, then turned, and froze, just slightly, when he saw Daniel approaching. "Oh," Collins said, eyebrows lifting. "You're still here?" "Yes," Daniel replied. "I was told you'd look into my complaint." Collins glanced around the lobby, then gestured toward a quieter corner. "Let's not make a scene." "I didn't," Daniel thought. "You did." They stood near a marble column. Collins folded his hands, all professionalism now, but there was irritation under it, sharp and poorly hidden. "As I said last night," Collins began, "we didn't find any issue with your report. Other guests didn't complain." "They did," Daniel said. "I heard them, and I recorded it." That gave Collins pause. Recorded? The noise, the shouting, and the response when I called downstairs? The manager's jaw tightened. "Sir, recording staff without consent? I recorded from my room, my own phone. That's not illegal." A few heads nearby turned. Collins lowered his voice. "What exactly are you hoping to achieve here?" Daniel met his eyes. Respect? Accountability? Or at the very least, honesty? For a moment, Collins said nothing. Then he gave a thin smile. "You're taking this very personally." Daniel nodded. Because it was. Silence stretched between them, uncomfortable and public. Finally, Collins sighed, as though indulging a child. "Fine," he said. "We'll review it again. You can email whatever you have to guest services. I'd rather speak to corporate." That did it. Collins's face changed, not dramatically, but enough. The confidence wavered. The smile slipped. "Corporate?" he repeated. "Yes." Another pause. Then Collins straightened. "Of course, that's your right." He handed Daniel a business card, his fingers lingering just a second too long. "Someone will be in touch." Daniel took the card. "I'll make sure of it." As he turned to leave, he noticed something new in the manager's eyes. Not annoyance, concern. By the third morning, the hotel felt different to Marcus. Not louder or quieter, but tighter, like the air itself had grown suspicious. Every step he took down the carpeted hallway seemed to echo longer than it should. Doors closed more carefully. Conversations stopped when he passed. He could feel it in the way eyes slid away from him, in the way smiles came a second too late or not at all. He had slept poorly, not because of the bed or the noise, but because of the unresolved weight pressing on his chest. He kept replaying the night before in his head, the unanswered calls to the front desk, the dismissive tone, the way his complaint had been treated as an inconvenience rather than a concern. It wasn't just about the noise anymore, it was about being ignored, about being made to feel invisible in a place where he was paying to be seen as a guest. When Marcus stepped into the elevator, a hotel employee in a crisp uniform stood inside, staring at their phone. The employee glanced up briefly, then back down, as if Marcus were part of the wallpaper. The elevator descended in silence. At the lobby, Marcus approached the front desk again. A different clerk was on duty now, a young woman with tired eyes and a practiced smile. Before he even spoke, she said, "Sir, if this is about last night, management is aware." "Aware is not the same as addressing it," Marcus replied calmly. His voice was steady, but his hands were clenched at his sides. "I was ignored for over an hour. I asked for help and didn't get any." She nodded quickly, typing something into the computer. "The manager will speak with you shortly." "How shortly?" Marcus asked. She hesitated. "He's in a meeting." Marcus exhaled slowly. He had heard that answer too many times in his life, in too many different places. "Then I'll wait," he said. He sat in one of the leather chairs near the lobby window. From there, he could see guests coming and going, families laughing, couples dragging suitcases, business travelers checking their watches. Some were greeted warmly by staff, offered bottled water or help with luggage. Marcus watched it all quietly, noticing the small differences most people never bothered to name. After nearly 40 minutes, the manager finally emerged from a side door. He was tall, sharply dressed, confident in the way men often were when they believed they were in control of a situation. He walked straight to the desk, spoke briefly to the clerk, then turned toward Marcus. "Mr. Harris?" the manager asked, his tone polite but distant. "Yes," Marcus said, standing. The manager gestured toward a corner of the lobby, away from other guests. "Let's talk." They stood facing each other, close enough that Marcus could see the manager's forced smile, the tension around his eyes. "I understand you were dissatisfied with our response last night," the manager began. I wasn't dissatisfied, Marcus said. I was ignored. The manager's smile tightened. I apologize if you felt that way. Our staff was very busy. Busy enough to answer everyone else but me? Marcus asked quietly. There it was, the flicker of irritation quickly masked. Sir, we treat all guests the same. Marcus held his gaze. Then explain why my calls weren't returned. Explain why my complaint was brushed off. Explain why I had to come down here twice to be acknowledged. The manager opened his mouth, then closed it. For a moment, he seemed unsure which explanation to choose. We can offer you a complimentary breakfast or a small discount on your stay, he said finally, as if reading from a script. Marcus shook his head. I don't want compensation. I want accountability. That word landed heavily between them. The manager glanced around the lobby, suddenly aware of nearby guests pretending not to listen. His posture stiffened. Sir, if you're unhappy, you're free to check out. Marcus felt a familiar anger rise, but he didn't let it show. Instead, he reached into his bag and pulled out his phone. Before I do anything, he said, there's something you should know. The manager frowned. And that is? Marcus looked him straight in the eyes. I documented everything. Times, calls, names, and the way I was spoken to. The manager's expression changed, not dramatically, but enough. A slight tightening of the jaw, a pause that lasted half a second too long. Marcus continued, his voice calm and clear. I travel often. I stay in hotels like this all over the country, and I've learned that when concerns like mine are ignored, it's rarely an accident. The lobby seemed quieter now. Even the background music felt muted. I'll be expecting a formal response, Marcus said, not excuses. For the first time since they began speaking, the manager looked genuinely uncomfortable. He nodded stiffly. I'll review the situation. Marcus turned and walked away, heading back toward the elevators. He could feel eyes on his back again, but this time it felt different, less dismissive, more uncertain. As the elevator doors closed, Marcus allowed himself a slow breath. He didn't know yet how this would end, but for the first time since he'd checked in, he knew one thing clearly. They were listening now. The silence that followed felt heavier than any shout. It pressed against the walls of the manager's office, against the thick carpet, against the framed certificates that suddenly looked cheap and meaningless. Marcus stood near the door, his posture calm but rigid, while the hotel manager stared at the paused screen on his laptop as if it might start lying for him. The regional director ended the call without another word. There was no dramatic threat, no raised voice, just a quiet, final sentence. We'll be handling this internally. Expect further instructions. The screen went black. For a long moment, no one moved. The manager finally cleared his throat. Mr. Lewis, he said, his tone completely different now, careful, strained. I want to apologize for the inconvenience you experienced. Marcus looked at him steadily. That wasn't an inconvenience, he replied. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. That was neglect, and it wasn't an accident. The front desk supervisor, who had earlier refused to look Marcus in the eye, shifted uncomfortably. Her hands were clasped so tightly, her knuckles were white. You ignored me because you assumed I didn't matter, Marcus continued. You decided my complaint wasn't worth your time. That's the part you need to understand. The manager swallowed. You're right, he said quietly. And you're right to be angry. I am, Marcus said, but I didn't record that call because I wanted revenge. I did it because this keeps happening, to people like me, and usually there's no proof. He turned toward the door, then paused. I won't be staying here tonight. Of course, the manager said quickly. Your stay will be fully comped. Transportation. Marcus raised a hand. I'll arrange it myself. As he walked through the lobby, the atmosphere had changed. Staff who had ignored him earlier now watched in uneasy silence. No one smiled, no one spoke. For the first time since he'd arrived, they saw him, not as a problem, not as a nuisance, but as someone they had underestimated. Outside, the night air was cool and sharp. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the tension slowly drain from his shoulders. His phone buzzed again, this time a message from the corporate office, brief and formal, acknowledging receipt of his complaint and promising a full investigation. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and started walking down the street, away from the glowing hotel entrance. Tomorrow, things would continue as usual for most of the world. But inside that building, policies would change, names would be remembered, and somewhere down the line, the next guest who spoke up might actually be heard. Marcus didn't smile, but he walked a little lighter.